Trauma is an emotional and neurological response to an event or an experience in one's life that often feels threatening to our emotional and physical security. The event creates such a lasting impression on a person that it can remain with them throughout their life. If not addressed and resolved, trauma can affect the way a person thinks and behaves. It can take up a great deal of space in one's personality, becoming a part of how they see themselves and show up in the world. The amazing news is that trauma can be resolved and healed. To heal trauma, it's important to have a willingness to fully acknowledge and address it. Trauma lingers and continues on into our adult experience when we continuously either suppress it or distract ourselves from it. If left unaddressed, trauma manifests as anxiety, irritability, confusion, disruptive sleep, perfectionism, needing to always be in control, perpetual anger, addiction, inability to focus, be present, distrust, low self-esteem and self-worth. So if any of those things are still in your experience, it might be a good idea to see if there may still be some type of trauma that needs to be addressed and healed so that we can no longer have to keep recreating those in our experiences. So the first step to resolving trauma is to acknowledge it. So one of the biggest symptoms of ignoring trauma is numbing ourselves. So we're distracting ourselves, whether it's not paying attention, not being present, whether it's some type of substance that we are abusing or whatnot. That is one of the main things that occurs when we are not fully honoring and acknowledging the trauma. Our only responsibility is to be willing and to choose to see ourselves. When we fully see ourselves, we're not going to get distracted in those patterns of needing others to see us. When we are seeing ourselves, when we are acknowledging ourselves, all of ourselves, including some of the things that we often don't necessarily resonate with or really enjoy, when we can fully see and honor and acknowledge all of that, we become such a powerhouse who naturally starts to see the world. So how do we fully acknowledge and see who we really are? So it's important to begin by acknowledging all of the parts that have our attention first. Usually, the mind is focused on the things that it doesn't want and the things that are very uncomfortable, because those are what are taking its focus, its attention. So any part of us that is not fully feeling acknowledged is because we are not allowing ourselves to honor and feel into the discomfort. So discomfort, when we are present, when we are aware and conscious, discomfort is a signal for us to acknowledge ourselves a little bit more, to show up for ourselves. And we do that by feeling into the discomfort. So many of us have suppressed our feelings to such a degree that our mind doesn't really think it knows how to feel. But if we just make it simple and ground it to the foundational level, you can start with wiggling your fingers. Can you feel that? Okay, wiggle your toes. Can you feel that? Good. Then you can place your hand over your heart. Can you feel your hand over your heart? Starting that simple, that will help you start to reconnect with the sensation of feeling. And then from there, we can start building and going into more of the emotion behind the feeling. So the mind creates those types of stories so that it can stay in its comfort zone. It doesn't like change. It likes things to be the exact same, as uncomfortable as that can be sometimes. So when we can be aware of that, then we don't have to buy into every story that the mind tells us, because the mind is just doing everything it can to keep itself safe the best way it knows how. We can have compassion for that. We can have love and care for that We don't have to go into it and believe as if it's our end-all truth. So one thing that's important to mention, specifically when it comes to trauma, is the concept of trauma response. A trauma response includes fight and flight response, freeze response, where one shuts down, they feel stuck, and then the other response is appease response, needing to accommodate. So it's fight or flight, freeze response, and appease response. If you find yourself during challenging situations going into one of those three, you're more than likely replaying an old trauma loop that is wanting to come out and respond in that same way. Whenever it happened, maybe it was from childhood, young adulthood, maybe recently, there's a pattern there that is continuing on a loop, and it does that until we address it. Something important to note on the subject of trauma response is something called re-traumatization. Re-traumatization occurs when an environmental cue related to the trauma, sound, smell, environment, triggers a fight, flight, or freeze response. The reaction and emotions can feel very similar, if not exactly the same, to the initial trauma. Trauma triggers and responses are different for everyone. While all environmental cues cannot be eliminated, we can empower ourselves to such a degree where we no longer find ourselves needing to be triggered in the same way as we used to be, causing us re-traumatization of the experience that we're having. So feeling and honoring the discomfort helps us create space between us and the thing causing us the discomfort. So I'm going to say that one more time. Feeling and honoring the discomfort itself helps us create space between us and the thing causing us discomfort. This happens because we are connecting with the peace underneath the discomfort, which is a reflection of our true self. When we step into something, we heal it. When we run away from it, when we try to please because of it or anything else, fight or flight, those are going to keep us recreating and actually giving our power away to the discomfort. But when we step into it, it no longer has power over us. Then we can connect with who we truly are, which is that eternal peace, that love, the universal self that has always been within you.